part of the problem for high achievers is that we set these unrealistically high expectations of ourselves. We set these stretch goals that we know are beyond our reach. And sometimes, whether it's one goal you choose and you know it's out of your reach, and about halfway you give up and you highly criticize yourself for it and you make yourself feel like a failure. Or maybe you have 8 meals you're trying to cook at once on one hot plate. You've picked 8 mini goals and you try to relentlessly pursue all of these goals at once. And because you're not seeing the progress you're making in all of these 8 different areas, you feel like a failure. Or maybe you continuously try to pursue them at the expense of your own health and well-being. You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. I spent the last 4 years trying to discover how to break the burnout cycle. And as a high achiever in a fast-paced world, it's very easy to slip back into old habits that leave you feeling overwhelmed and left behind. If you're anything like me, then you need to hear this. It's not your fault. Each episode is dedicated to help break the stigma around mental health in the workplace, end burnout culture for good, and the action steps that you can take today to do your part towards your personal growth and success. I am so happy that you're here today, and thank you again for joining us. So we're coming up towards the end of January, and I really hope that you took this time to explore different things rather than setting that, air quotes, New Year's resolution at the start of January or the end of December, being like, I'm going to insert something vague here, and then give up on it about 2 weeks later. Try and think of something that, you can work on for the year. Take January as a time to step back and breathe and think, what would I like to do for myself? Where do I see myself at the end of 2024? What's one step I could take in order to get me to where I want to be? Now, you don't need to improve or change your whole life by the end of the year, but what one step could you take in order to improve your lifestyle, to improve how you see yourself, how you see yourself, how others see you? What's one thing you could improve on? In the last few episodes, I talked about, let's say, your extrinsic motivation factors versus the intrinsic motivations. Extrinsic is usually like external validation or money or looking successful, whereas the intrinsic desires that you have, what motivates you intrinsically, are things that fill you with a sense of purpose. They help you develop a deeper connection with someone else. They make you feel more alive, or you feel like you are growing in some part of your life, that you're leveling up in a key area, whether that be in your relationships, in your health, in your career. It changes you internally. And the intrinsic motivators are much more consistent and sustainable than the extrinsic motivators. But part of the problem is, especially as high achievers, we tend to try to tackle too much at once. We are highly critical of ourselves, that we always expect so much of ourselves. And we tend to be perfectionists as well, that we don't want to half do something that we promise to do ourselves. We want to see it to fruition at the expense of other things in our life. And sometimes, if done right, yes, you can sacrifice some elements in order to get laser focused on one, but sometimes people sabotage their own health and well-being in order to achieve a perceived goal that they feel will make them feel more successful. Part of why high achievers burn out is because they set these unrealistic high expectations of themselves. And then if that falls apart because they can't sustain that expectation, that goal, the progress that they were expecting, and they let that fall apart, they criticize themselves. They make themselves feel like a failure and give up on that goal entirely. Or else they try to juggle too many things at once, like trying to cook 8 meals in different pots all on one hot plate at the same time, just alternating between each pot to try and cook them or half cook them in between, rather than just focusing on one meal and cooking one meal to perfection, to fruition. And either that they give up on the meals and leave everything half done, and they feel like they're a failure because they don't see the progress they're making in 8 different mini goals they've set for themselves. Or they relentlessly pursue trying to get all of these things done at once at the expense of their own health and well being, or at the expense of not spending time with those that they love. So, how do we overcome that? How do we overcome this self sabotaging behavior? Because believe me, I've been aware of this for so many years and I still find myself doing it from time to time. For instance, when I first moved to Switzerland, I was like, yes, I need to integrate so much into Swiss culture. I need to learn German over the next couple of months. Otherwise, I will still be so lost. And I started doing intensive German classes, like 8 classes a week for 10 weeks. I was like, yes, I'll be so fluent in German in the next 2 3 months. But that obviously wasn't the case. It was so overwhelming. And I realized that I was sabotaging other areas of my life that I care for so much, that I should have been putting those first and I wouldn't be overwhelmed. And I realized I'm putting myself in the early stages of the burnout cycle again. And it's time to take a leaf out of my own book, recognize the early signs, take a step back, take a breath, give myself some leeway. And okay, what's one step I can take, one step at a time? What's the one thing I can focus on? It always brings me back to Gary Keller's The One Thing. What's the one thing that if I do this one thing, it will make everything else easier or unnecessary? So when it comes to goal setting, it's so much easier to focus on one goal rather than focusing on 8 mini goals, and make it one goal that you feel, okay, I'm not pursuing one thing relentlessly and hoping that this will be the thing that makes me feel successful. What's the one thing you can do right now that will make everything else seem easier or unnecessary to do? Maybe it's, as I said, looking at the things that you already have and finishing any unfinished projects. Maybe you've already set mini goals in 2023, and okay, you haven't finished them by the end of 2023, but can you continue to pursue maybe one of them to fruition and then choose another one and bring that to fruition in 2024? Look at all the unfinished things that you have and be like, okay, there was something I did earlier in my life, but I never did it to perfection. Maybe it was learning a musical instrument. And maybe it was, oh, I remember I wanted to learn how to sing that song. Maybe I need to get a few private lessons and sing that song the way I want to. Maybe you want to join a choir. You want to join Toastmasters or public speaking. Things that you can start at a small step and work your way up. Maybe it's something as simple as taking better care of your health. As I always like to say, start your morning with a glass of water, and that's your win for the day. Any more water you drink after that is a bonus. It's highly recommended to drink more than just one glass. But if you're in the habit of getting up in the morning and starting with a sugar laden coffee and wondering why you have a headache at 10 a.m., then maybe making the switch to starting your day with a glass of water is a good way to start the day. You're hydrating yourself, you've got better mental clarity, and you might make better decisions in terms of snacking later in the day and hydrating yourself. So, if you took the time to reflect over January on what are the things that drive you most, what are your key desires, the key areas of your life that you want to improve in, what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel like you could develop a deeper connection with those in your life, those that you love, those that you work with, your team? What is a meaningful pursuit? What would bring more meaning to your life? What do you feel gives you a sense of purpose? Or is there an area of your life where you feel less confident than you used to and you want to improve in that key area? It could be your health. It could be a sense of awareness of yourself, of others. Maybe you want to be more adventurous. Maybe you want to have more fun in your life. How could you improve your element of fun in your life? Is it going out more? Is it taking more holidays? What would you have to do to achieve that? And once you make a list of all these different areas of your life that you want to change to improve, pick one. What's one you could focus on to completion? Maybe one would take less time. It might only take 2 or 3 weeks. It could take 2 or 3 months, but set that goal first and be like, okay, I'm going to focus on this one thing to completion before I look at anything else on the list. And that can be a very hard thing to do as a high achiever, an overachiever. You're trying to tick all the boxes at once. And you're going to keep coming back and constantly scanning that page, being like, okay, this feels like it's taking too long. It's taken me more than 2 months. I want to see if there's anything else I can get started in the meantime. Stop multitasking. Take a step back and focus on one thing. I'm going to finish on this note. One thing that really helps me when I decide on one goal I want to focus on for the next few months is letting someone know that this is my focus for the next few months. And whether they just shrug it off and go like, oh, that's nice or not, I have let someone else know I've made it concrete in my own thoughts that I'm going to focus on this. I've made it real. I've made it tangible by saying it out loud. This is my one focus. This is the one thing I'm going to do. So I invite you all, if you can decide on that one thing, just let me know. Just send me a message on Instagram or send me an email. Just say, my one thing is, and say what it is and how long you plan to do it for. My one thing is to start a gym membership for the next 3 months and give it a go. Maybe go 2 or 3 times a week for the next 3 months and see if I can set a routine. May or may not work. It may not suit your lifestyle balance, but you've tried. You've tried for 3 months straight and keep a track of how many days you can track it. Or I'm going to start my glass of water in the morning for the next 3 months and see how I feel and keep a track of that. So I invite you all on eugene.leeway on Instagram. Just send me a DM and say, my one thing is, or send me an email at eugene@leeway.ie and just write the subject, my one thing, or the one thing. I really can't wait to hear from you all. And I do have something special to offer to those people who do reach out with their one thing. So I'll give about 2 weeks grace period. Let's say the 12th of February is the deadline. Let me know your one thing by the 12th of February. And yeah, I've got something really special I want to share with you. So until then, take care.